What if everything you saw from NASA was nothing more than a Hollywood-worthy act? It may sound crazy, but what if I told you that the most famous images of space, the ones you've seen in the news, in school textbooks, and even on NASA's official website, could have been created inside a studio with cameras, lights, and cutting-edge technology, carefully scripted to look real? Have you ever wondered why many NASA photos look like CGI? Why are most space mission videos so visually perfect? Why, even in 2025, we have almost no images hardness of the Moon, Mars, or even the Earth itself made live and without editing. Today, in this video, we're going to dive into the hidden side of space exploration, what NASA shows, what Hollywood helps publicize, and what may be being hidden from you since your first step on the Moon. Let's talk about manipulated images, suspicious edits, use of CGI, leaked excerpts from productions that should never have been made public. Let's question what is reality and what is performance. After all, if NASA has billions in budget, full access to cutting-edge technology, and absolute narrative control, why not use audiovisual as a silent weapon of control and conviction? While many believe they are seeing real space, there are those who say they are just watching another cinematic masterpiece under the NASA Studios label. What if this theory isn't just another crazy internet conspiracy? What if there is evidence? What if part of the space story we know is actually a carefully written plot, directed by a space agency that dominates the world stage? Get ready, because from now on, you won't look at NASA images the same way again. What we're going to show you here may shake your perception of reality, and you may discover that everything you believed in was just a carefully staged illusion show. Now watch carefully the next few seconds. They may contain the key piece no one wants you to see. But before continuing, leave your like and subscribe to the channel right now. This is more important than you might think. This type of content not welcome by everyone. When we talk about image manipulation, when we question NASA's official version, we run the risk of being silenced. Your like and subscription help keep this content alive, circulating, reaching those who need to hear what no one is saying. We are talking about something serious. It's about truth. It's about information control. And the more people are aware, the harder it will be to hide what really happens. You feel like something is wrong, don't you? So stay with us, because what comes now may completely change the way you see space, NASA, and everything that has been shown to date. Let's move. At this point, you may already be starting to see space with different eyes. But don't worry, because what's coming now will make you ask yourself, have I already been deceived without realizing it? Stop for a second and think about the most impactful images you've ever seen about space. Those scenes of astronauts floating, ships landing on distant planets, the red soil of Mars, the bluish glow of Earth seen from space. Now, tell me honestly, can you tell what's Hollywood CGI and what's real NASA? Films like Interstellar, Gravity, and Lost on Mars, they are not just entertainment. They shape our perception of how space should look. Every detail from the movement of costumes to the lighting of a planet is carefully produced to feel authentic, real, believable. And not by chance, many of these visual effects use the same visual references released by NASA itself. Have you ever noticed how the design of spacecraft in science fiction films is almost always similar to that of NASA missions? Have you noticed that the way gravity is represented, or how astronauts move, has exactly the same style as the videos released by the space agency? This is no coincidence. There is an invisible visual cooperation between what NASA shows the world and what Hollywood turns into box office. In many cases, studios hire scientific consultants, and guess who they call? Former NASA engineers, agency experts, and even official images that serve as a basis for building the scenarios. What was supposed to be just scientific inspiration gradually becomes a visual mirror of the official narrative. The line between what is a simulation and what is a documentary is getting thinner and thinner. Now stop and think again. When you see an image of Mars, can you be absolutely sure that it is real? That didn't go through color correction? That it wasn't put together based on computer-generated images? Would you trust 100% if they showed you a new space discovery with a perfectly clean background, vibrant colors, and a camera that is always well-positioned? The common public, most of the time, don't question. Because we grew up consuming manipulated images from an early age. Hollywood has taught us what the space look is. And when NASA delivers something similar, our mind accepts it without resistance, because the brain associates that with scientific truth. But what if everything is part of the same game? The problem is that the more familiar an image is, the easier it is to be accepted as real. This is a psychological phenomenon known as exposure effect. And it is exactly this effect that transforms the unreal into something reliable. NASA knows this. The film industry too. And together, even if indirectly, they build a collective perception, a popular belief about the universe and our position in it. When films like Gravity are praised for scientific fidelity, or when Netflix documentaries use computer-generated images as representations, we are being primed, conditioned to accept any visual that looks like that. This is dangerous, because it takes away the population's critical sense and feeds the illusion that we are seeing the truth, when in fact we are watching an edited version of reality. And NASA, in turn, he is a master at creating impactful images. Just look at any space launch, any photo released from the James Webb Telescope, any animation that explains how the universe works. They are always perfect, polished, almost cinematic images. The kind of visuals that not only inform, but mesmerize. And when the image hypnotizes, it stops being questioned. And here begins the big question that drives this video. Is NASA using cinematic aesthetics to build a narrative? Is the perfect look actually a carefully planned distraction? Because if it is, we are facing a communication strategy that goes far beyond science. We are talking about perception control on a global scale. After all, if NASA is the official source of everything we know about the universe, and at the same time controls the visual narrative with the indirect support of the entertainment industry, who oversees this? Who guarantees that what is being shown is, in fact, real? This is why keeping people informed is so important. Because what's at stake isn't just the truth about space, It's how they manipulate what you believe about reality, and you may even think, but why would they do that? And the answer is simple: control. The more people believe the official narrative, the fewer questions they ask. Less curiosity, less rebellion, less need to seek other sources. And when that happens, the system strengthens. Illusion becomes consensus. The lie becomes the truth. Now tell me, do you really believe that every image that NASA releases does not undergo any type of treatment? No filters, no cropping, no digital correction. Do you think that an agency with a budget of billions of dollars capable of monitoring planets light years away wouldn't also have the best image editors in the world at its disposal? What's more, do you really think that, in the midst of the space race, the dispute for geopolitical power and the advancement of AI and deepfake technologies, would the images that reach the public be 100% transparent, pure, raw, without manipulation? This is the point where fiction meets reality, and perhaps surpasses it. Have you ever noticed how certain NASA videos look almost the same as movie trailers? And we're not just talking about quality. We are talking about visual storytelling, scene composition, cinematographic angles. Even the soundtracks used in NASA corporate videos are carefully selected to have an emotional impact. This is no coincidence. This is technique. This is strategy. This is high-level content production. And if you think this is just done to educate the public, think again. Because the more the image impacts, the more it sticks in the mind. And the more it sticks, the less you question. Now I want to hear from you. When was the last time you stopped to reflect on the origin of a space image? When did you really investigate whether it was real or just seemed real? Comment below if you've ever had that feeling of watching something that looked more like a film than a scientific record. Write in the comments, is this real or Hollywood? I really want to know what you think. Why do so many NASA images look edited? This is a question that increasingly arises among those who observe carefully and don't just passively accept what is shown to them. When you start to look closer, you notice that there are patterns, visual coincidences, and often technical inconsistencies that go unnoticed by the general public, but that scream out to those who allow themselves to question. Let's look at one of the greatest symbols of space exploration, the photos of the Apollo mission to the moon. Iconic images that traveled the world, graced the covers of magazines, school books, and became a reference for human advancement. But there is one detail that still intrigues us today. Where are the stars? We are talking about an environment without atmosphere, without light pollution, where theoretically the stars should shine with absurd intensity. And yet, none of them appear in the photos. The official explanation has always been technical. Shutter speed, limited exposure, focus on the lunar surface. But that doesn't convince everyone. Why we're not talking about one or two photos? We are talking about dozens, hundreds, all of them with the sky completely black. Not even a visible star, not even a point of light. And this directly contrasts with the reality observed by any amateur photographer who records Earth's night sky with a simple DSLR camera. The stars are always there. Why do they only disappear when NASA takes photos? And this is not an isolated case. When comparing side by side some official NASA photos with movie scenes, the similarity is disconcerting. The soil of Mars, for example, in some images released by the agency, presents such perfect tones, with such clean textures and such intense colors, that they directly resemble the scenery of Lost on Mars, film starring Matt Damon. The reddish tones, the mountains in the background, the total absence of suspended dust, the sharpness of the horizon. Everything looks more like a graphic rendering than a real photo taken millions of kilometers from Earth, and it doesn't stop there. In many records released by NASA, we see highly questionable visual elements, shadows that do not follow the direction of the light source, reflections on helmets where there should not be any type of reflected structure, and even objects that appear and disappear between one image and another without any consistent official explanation. These are called silent details. Those that are there but no one comments on. This leads us to an even deeper question. What, in fact, are we seeing in these images? Are they documentary records of a spatial reality? Or are they compositions carefully treated, edited, adjusted to make an impact, generate confidence, create emotion, and support a narrative? NASA, being one of the most powerful and respected institutions in the world, has complete control over what is released to the public. It is the primary source of the images we know about the universe. And at the same time that it shows us supposed evidence of great discoveries, it also omits details, processes, files, applies filters, and, in many cases, publishes images that have already gone through several editing stages before reaching the official website. All of this is public. It is in the agency's own disclosure terms. They do not hide that the images are processed, but they also do not make it clear how much they are manipulated. Why would a scientific agency need to adjust an image so much? Why correct, alter, or even recreate entire parts of a scene if the objective is to show reality as it is? The answer we hear is always the same: improve visualization for educational purposes. But is that all? If we look carefully at the images from probes that supposedly reach distant planets like Jupiter or Saturn, we will see that, in many cases, what is disclosed are artistic simulations. That is, computer-generated representations based on data. It's there, written in small print. But the public, when they see these images circulating online, believe they are looking at a real photograph, when, in fact, they are consuming a graphic interpretation of reality, not reality itself. And the most surprising thing is that, when these images are analyzed by independent experts, photographers, graphic designers, image analysts, serious questions arise. There have been cases where editing layers were identified in raw files, details that indicate digital manipulation in records that should be pure, scientific, inviolable. The problem is that it never makes headlines. There is no open debate. There is no journalistic coverage of these discoveries. They remain on the sidelines, in forums, independent channels, and blogs by digital researchers. They are quickly discredited as conspiracy theories, even when there are technical foundations behind them. Meanwhile, large vehicles continue to reproduce NASA images without any challenge. And the public continues to watch, believe, share. Okay? A cycle that feeds on blind trust, institutional authority, and a visual aesthetics that border on cinematic perfection. And then it's hard not to hypothesize. Are we seeing space, or just a carefully edited version of it? Is NASA, with all its technological apparatus and exclusive access to the cosmos, showing us the truth, or just what it wants us to see? If Hollywood directors know exactly how to move an audience with epic images and spine-chilling soundtracks, why imagine that a billion-dollar agency like NASA wouldn't do the same to win hearts, minds, and budgets? After all, every great narrative needs a good script, and all good fiction needs to be convincing. But what happens when the fiction disguises itself as scientific reality? What happens when images that are supposed to document facts start to look more and more like movie scenes? I want to know your opinion. Have you ever had the feeling that something in NASA images seemed too good to be true? Ever seen a photo of space that looked more like a movie poster than a scientific record? Tell me here in the comments. Does this feel real to you? Or even NASA or Hollywood? Your answer could open the next mystery. And just when we think we've seen enough to start to suspect, that's when the real hole starts to open up. Because all of this, the processed images, the absences of stars, the inexplicable reflections, the visual similarity with science fiction films, may not be the result of coincidence or photographic technique alone. There is a much deeper, more disturbing, and for many, absolutely real theory. The theory of coordinated visual manipulation between NASA and the Hollywood film industry. According to this hypothesis, the collaboration between these two powers, one responsible for science and space exploration, the other for entertainment and the construction of narratives, is neither accidental nor isolated. It would be strategic, planned, and absolutely essential to keeping public perception in check. The manipulation of images by NASA, in this context, would not just be an aesthetic issue, but rather a tool for social engineering, an effective way of defining what the world should believe about what exists beyond Earth, and that's where the name Stanley Kubrick emerges with force. Visionary director, extreme perfectionist. Genius behind works like 2001, A Space Odyssey, a film released in 1968, just a year before the Apollo 11 mission landed on the moon. Coincidence? Many think not. 2001, it was considered a revolutionary milestone in visual realism in cinema. The special effects, the gravity simulations, the silent shots of space, everything seems so real that the film still impresses today. And then, The following year, NASA presents us with images of the first man walking on lunar soil. In black and white, shaky, with low resolution, but still. With a mise en scène that curiously dialogues with the aesthetics created by Kubrick. Lights coming from a single point, shadows that don't behave as they should, strangely choreographed movement, and an American flag fluttering in an environment where there shouldn't be wind. Many believe that Kubrick was reportedly hired by NASA itself to direct, or at least supervise, the filming of the lunar landing in a secret studio, a theory that has been circulating for decades, fueled by small clues that have never been fully explained or denied. Some say that this happened in secret installations on the outskirts of Area 51. Others claim that it was all done in a NASA warehouse, with cutting-edge technology and absolute control over the leakage of information. Interestingly, years later, Kubrick would refuse to give interviews about the Apollo project, and his later films began to contain symbolic elements, subliminal messages, visual clues that many interpret as silent confessions. In the film The Shining, for example, the character Danny wears a sweater with the Apollo 11 rocket embroidered on it in an emblematic scene. Coincidence or coded message? There are also excerpts from interviews with former NASA employees, former engineers, and even camera operators from the time who, over the years, made disjointed statements, full of gaps and, in some cases, contradictory. People who participated in live broadcasts but today cannot explain basic details of the mission. Statements such as, "I don't remember exactly," "I didn't have access to that part," or "it all happened very quickly," are repeated, reinforcing the idea that something there was carefully rehearsed and then erased from institutional memory to further fuel this theory. We have visual comparisons made by experts which show how certain angles of lunar photos fit with millimeter precision in simulations made with artificial lights in studio. The curvature of the light, the absence of atmospheric dispersion, the perfect cuts on the horizon. Technical details that only reinforce the idea that the moon landing could have been the greatest film production ever made by humanity, and not an actual space feat. And here comes the most delicate point. If NASA was able to stage an event of this magnitude in 1969, what else could be being manipulated today with infinitely more advanced technology resources? We are talking about an agency with access to the most modern editing tools, 3D rendering, and real-time computer graphics. Tools that can easily simulate environments, objects, celestial phenomena, all with a degree of realism that surpasses any detection capacity of the human eye. It is no coincidence that today there are entire documentaries dedicated to deconstructing NASA images. Investigations carried out by independent filmmakers, visual researchers, and truth enthusiasts who identify recurring patterns, suspicious cuts, duplicated elements, and digital artifacts in photographs considered real. And the scariest thing is that, even in the face of this evidence, most people continue to blindly believe the official narrative, without ever questioning, without ever investigating, without ever stopping to think. What if all this is a modern, refined, technically impeccable performance? Still, a performance. We're talking about manipulation so well done that it doesn't just convince, it educa. She shapes generations. She creates collective memories based on images that may never have happened. And the most serious thing, she becomes untouchable. Because questioning NASA is, for many, the same as questioning science. And this has become almost a taboo, a modern sin, an attack on reason. But whoever controls the narrative also controls what is considered reason. Whoever has the monopoly on images has the power to say what is real or not. And if NASA and Hollywood, directly or indirectly, walk together in this process, what we have is a symbolic construction of space, a performance of global proportions that defines what all of humanity believes about the universe. This is exactly why the debate needs to continue. Because while we are distracted by stunning visual effects, brilliant animation, and moving images of astronauts smiling at the immensity of the cosmos, we may be being guided by a carefully scripted, rehearsed, and perfectly executed narrative. Tell me in the comments. Do you believe Stanley Kubrick had any involvement with the Apollo project? Right there, Kubrick knew. Or it all started in 1969. If this theory makes sense to you, I really want to see your opinion, now that we're starting to see the possible connections between Hollywood and NASA. You might be wondering, okay, but where is the real evidence for this? Where is the visual evidence that could support this wild theory? And this is precisely where things start to get even more interesting. And, at the same time, it's uncomfortable, because when we look closely at the images released by NASA, especially those related to the Moon, Mars, and deep space, we begin to notice a pattern of visual inconsistencies that goes far beyond simple technical errors. They are subtle anomalies, but that stand out to those who have the slightest critical sense and investigative curiosity. Let's start with the shadows. In several photos from the Apollo missions, we see shadows cast in different directions, even with a single light source, the sun. This defies the basic laws of physics. In an environment without atmosphere, with a single intense light, all shadows should follow the same direction. But that's not what we see. In some images, objects cast crossed shadows, indicating multiple light sources, like those that exist inside a studio. Coincidence? Perhaps. But try finding this kind of distortion in photos taken by robotic probes on other planets. The pattern repeats itself. And what about reflections? In several astronaut helmets, we can identify strange shapes reflected in the visor. In a famous photo from the Apollo 17 mission, for example, the reflection of the helmet shows something that resembles a metallic structure, as if it were a studio frame. This type of visual element is not covered in official documents. There is no explanation. It is simply there, ignored, but present. Now imagine giving a quality zoom in some of these photos, something that many independent researchers have done. What did we find? Badly cropped edges, objects that appear to have been digitally superimposed, perspective flaws, and even graphic artifacts, similar to those that appear when rendering software does not correctly finish an image. And speaking of software comes the question that echoes more and more loudly. Was this image made by NASA, or by the same software that creates the Avengers films? The similarity is unsettling. When we put side by side an image of Martian soil released by NASA and a scene from the film Lost on Mars, not just the colors, but the framing, the type of lighting, and even the composition of the environment seem to come from the same graphic package. Stones with the same textures, mountains with the same cuts, dramatic side lighting. All of this is visually striking, but also aesthetically standardized. This also happens with images from the James Webb Telescope. Vibrant colors, galaxies in artistic formats, exaggerated contrasts, and almost poetic clarity. But what many don't know is that these images, they are not photos in the traditional sense, are visual interpretations based on infrared data. In other words, they are artistic recreations processed with the help of graphic software. NASA itself admits this, and yet, these images are widely circulated as records of the universe. People share, get emotional, believe, without knowing that they are seeing a constructed version of reality. Now, let's go deeper. There are cases of images with duplicate elements, as if parts of the scene had been copied and pasted. A classic example is in one of the photos of the Opportunity rover on Mars. Some rocks appear repeated, with the same shape, same position, same shadow pattern, as if they were clips from an image bank reused at different times. This did not go unnoticed by those who closely follow NASA's launches. But again, no clear answer was given. Another important point: lens effects that do not match the type of equipment used in the missions. In several images, we noticed optical distortions typical of cinema cameras. With reduced depth of field, exaggerated flare effects, and even dark vignetting at the edges. Features that are normally applied in post-production to create a more dramatic effect, but we're talking about space missions, not music videos. And yet, the released files display exactly this type of aesthetic, and the comparison doesn't stop there. Researchers have already carried out tests using artificial intelligence to identify graphic patterns in images from NASA and film studios. The result was shocking. Similarities in color codes, light distribution, and texture mapping point to a level of graphic construction that would hardly be justified in natural records of the space. What begins to form is a mosaic of clues. Small flaws hidden amid spectacular images that, when analyzed coldly, reveal more about who created them than about what they supposedly portray. And all of this raises a question that echoes ever louder behind the scenes of the internet. On investigative forums, on channels that refuse to swallow everything without chewing, could NASA be using film production technology to fake or dramatize parts of its missions? And if so, why? Why risk decades of credibility with manipulations that, sooner or later, may be discovered? Is the goal just to make the content more accessible to the public? Or are we facing an orchestrated campaign to build a global visual narrative where what matters is not the fact itself, but rather the sensation it causes? The mystery is not just in the stars. It's in every carefully adjusted pixel, in every strangely cast shadow, in every reflection that doesn't match logic. It's in every image that should be proof, but perhaps is just part of a very well-written script. Now, it's up to you. Ever seen an image from NASA that seemed too artificial, too perfect, too dramatic to be spontaneous? Write it in the comments. This image seemed fake to me, or NASA, or CG. Choose a phrase, leave your opinion, and help this video reach more people who also deserve to see everything with their own eyes. Faced with so much suspicious visual evidence, shadows that do not behave as they should, inexplicable reflections, duplicated elements, and cinematographic aesthetic standards applied to NASA images, it is natural that questions arise. But to be fair and create a serious debate, it is also important to understand what does NASA itself say about all this. After all, every story has two sides, and here the North American Space Agency also presents arguments that, according to it, justify these apparent inconsistencies. The official explanation is simple and straightforward. Images undergo technical treatment for scientific and didactic purposes. According to NASA, photos captured by space probes, rovers, telescopes, or even manned missions are not presented in their raw form for a technical reason. The cameras use special sensors that capture light at wavelengths invisible to the human eye, especially in missions that work with infrared, ultraviolet, or gamma spectrums. Therefore, scientists apply filters, color corrections, and visual interpretations to transform this raw data into understandable images for the general public. Furthermore, the agency argues that, in many cases, the image does not represent what the camera saw in the traditional sense, but rather what it recorded as a data reading. And, therefore, the use of graphic edits, color balancing, and even the assembly of panoramic compositions is something expected and authorized. Within the scientific field, a clear example of this is the James Webb Telescope. The colorful images that caused a stir on social media, depicting multicolored nebulae and distant galaxies, are actually compilations made based on infrared data which were converted to visible tones based on a pre-established coding. Each color there was assigned manually to represent different types of chemical elements or densities. That's no lie, says NASA. It's science translated visually. They also claim that the absence of stars in photos of the moon is explained by the technical settings of the cameras used in the Apollo missions, as the camera's exposure was adjusted to capture the illuminated surface of the moon, extremely bright. The stars, which are much less intense, do not appear in the image. It's like trying to photograph a starry sky with a flashlight pointed directly at the lens. The most intense light extinguishes the weakest. According to NASA, it is not manipulation. It is a technical limitation of the time. In the case of shadows that follow different directions, the justification revolves around the irregular relief of the lunar soil and the way in which sunlight interacts with this relief. They claim that the curvature of the terrain can distort the apparent direction of shadows. And the same goes for unexpected reflections. The astronaut's mirrored helmet would reflect any surrounding object, including parts of the suit itself or recording equipment. Still, for many, this does not explain the recurring pattern of images, with aesthetic characteristics similar to those produced by CGI software used in Hollywood. NASA counters by saying that technological evolution makes scientific images increasingly closer to realistic cinema renderings, not because they are fake, but because we now have resolution, depth, and color fidelity that didn't exist before. And it is natural for the public to confuse a very high-quality image with something artificial. But here, the legitimate doubt arises. If there's nothing to hide, why edit? Why apply so many post-production layers, filters, graphic reconstructions, and color changes? Why not also publish the original images, the raw recordings, without adjustments? Why does most of the public never have access to the actual files? Only the final version presented in a visually striking way. NASA claims that the raw files are available in scientific databases, accessible to researchers and technicians, but the lay public rarely knows this and is almost never encouraged to search for this type of material. What is shared on social media, in press conferences and in the media, are always treated images, already formatted to cause impact, beauty, and emotion. And it is exactly this process that makes many people suspicious, because there's a difference between adjusting contrast to better visualize a crater and turning an entire planet into colors we'd never see with the naked eye. There is a line between illustrating a concept and dramatizing an image. And when that line fades, the audience begins to wonder, are they showing me science or selling a visual story? Furthermore, there is a delicate history of contradictions and retractions within NASA itself. There have been cases where images, released as authentic, were later recognized as artistic compositions. There have been digitally altered promotional photos that have been used in official materials. This undermines trust and raises doubts that are difficult to erase with a simple technical statement. The most disturbing thing of all is that, even in the face of these explanations, distrust remains. Because what is at stake is not just the technical quality of the image, it is the intention behind it. And when the image goes through an editing process so sophisticated, so controlled, and so similar to what we see in major film studios, what stops the public from questioning the veracity of what is being shown? Maybe the question isn't even whether or not they are manipulating, but yes, to what extent they are willing to manipulate to preserve a narrative. And this question, however uncomfortable it may be, continues to echo. I want to know what you think about this. Do you believe these technical adjustments are justified? Or do you think there is something more behind so much visual editing? A comment below with the phrase, "If it's real, why edit it?" Or "I want to see the raw image." Tell me, honestly, do you still believe that everything we see is 100% true? And it is precisely at this point that the fine line between technical explanation and purposeful manipulation begins to dissolve. Because if everything was just a matter of scientific filters, color adjustments, or light correction, how can we explain what was said by those inside? We are no longer talking about external theories or speculations based on visual comparisons. We are talking about reports coming from people who worked directly with the files, with the data, with the behind-the-scenes images that the entire world consumes as absolute truth. One of the most intriguing and at the same time disconcerting examples comes from former employees of NASA itself. Technicians and image analysts who, after leaving their positions, decided to tell what they knew. In a rare interview, which went practically unnoticed by the mainstream media, a data visualization analyst stated clearly, "Yes, we use Photoshop to assemble images of the Earth. It's no secret. That's how we do it." Key? This line, said casually, could go unnoticed if it weren't for the weight of the context. He was referring to the creation of the famous blue marble. Those iconic images of Earth seen from space with vibrant colors, perfectly distributed clouds, clean contours of oceans and continents. These images, which for decades fed our imagination about the planet, they are not unique photographs. They are assemblies made up of thousands of individual pieces of data put together in graphic software. And the most impressive thing, NASA itself admits this in public documents. What is shocking is not the use of Photoshop itself, but the way these images are presented to the public without due clarification. To anyone looking from the outside, it looks like a photo taken by a camera positioned thousands of kilometers away, a click from the universe. But in reality, it is a digital collage, an artificially created visual mosaic. And this completely changes the weight of the image, especially when we understand that it is used as an official symbol of scientific truth. And there's more. In another statement, a former employee of the agency reported that there were entire departments dedicated exclusively to the visual processing of files, not just to make them more understandable, but more attractive to the human eye. According to him, it was common for low-definition images to be graphically reconstructed, based on visual estimates, to later be presented as real records. This included adding shadows, relief simulations, recreating textures, and even retouching areas that had been corrupted or not captured by the sensors. In simple terms, entire parts of some space images are not real. They are completed based on assumptions. And perhaps the most symbolic case of this break in expectations was the release of an image of Earth in 2012, used widely in official materials. When asked about its authenticity, the responsible designer, who worked under contract with NASA, responded without hesitation. "Of course, it's Photoshop, but it has to be. We don't have a camera with a lens big enough to capture the entire Earth." Like this. Now stop and think. How many times have you seen this image circulating as the real photo of the Earth? How many newspaper articles, school books, environmental and commercial campaigns from NASA itself used this graphic representation without making it clear that it was created digitally? This is the real break of expectation. It's not just the fact that there is manipulation. It is the fact that manipulation is admitted, but disguised, minimized, diluted in technical explanations that the majority of the population does not question. And when we discover this, everything starts to change. Because we realize that behind the impeccable images and speeches of scientific authority, there is a careful, scripted, and strategically controlled visual construction, not unlike the way Hollywood constructs its blockbusters. Tell me honestly, did you know that these official images of Earth were made in Photoshop? Have you ever heard someone from NASA state this so clearly? Comment below, "It changed my outlook," or even "I want to see the real Earth," if this revelation surprised you as much as it surprised me. Let's move this debate forward. After everything we've shown so far, internal reports, admitted manipulations, official images processed in Photoshop, shadows and reflections that don't match, it's difficult to continue looking at space, images with the same eyes. With each detail revealed, a new question arises. Are we seeing the real universe, or just a carefully produced scenario? NASA, for decades, controlled what the world sees when it comes to space. It doesn't just show images, it shapes our perception. And when we see that these images are constructed with graphic editing, digital effects, and compositions made in software, the question that remains is, what if this is all part of an act? Just imagine a closed studio with digital backgrounds, LED panels simulating planetary landscapes, cameras adjusted to capture every movement perfectly. This already exists in Hollywood. What if it's also being used to construct the reality that NASA touts? What if most of what we see about space ... is created in studios? Perhaps the answer lies in the way everything is presented. Visually impeccable, flawless, with a cinematic aesthetic. Everything very perfect, very dramatic, very ... convincing. But reality is not always perfect. Nature has imperfections. The question is, why doesn't NASA show these imperfections? And now the final question. Is NASA really showing us the universe? Or just giving us another movie script with actors, art direction, and special effects? If you've made it this far, it's because something in this video moved you. Maybe it was that image that seemed too perfect, or that statement from the former employee who confirmed the use of Photoshop in official images of Earth ... Whatever. It was, if it made you think differently, if it took you out of your comfort zone, then this channel is for you. Here we don't accept everything that is shown as absolute truth. We investigate, compare, question, and go deep behind the scenes of what NASA would perhaps prefer no one to look at so closely. Then subscribe to the channel now. This is more than watching videos. It's being part of a community that thinks outside the box, that isn't afraid to ask, what if this is all just another well-told story? Now that you understand how images can be manipulated, it's time to take the next step. In the next video, you will see what strange things have NASA satellites recorded in space. Real images, captured by official equipment, which show anomalies. Mysterious objects and events that have never been explained. These records exist, and you will have access to them.